Can spinal flow give you relief from headaches? Like, I mean, even if they're migraines? Let's jump right in. All right, so first of all, we're going to talk about what is spinal flow. In case you've never heard of it, we'll set you up from the start to understand what it is, understand like some of the big principles behind it, and then we'll jump into how, what, according to spinal flow, actually causes headaches. Where are they housed in the body? Like, where is the problem stored within the body? And then once again, how can spinal flow help you and help your body overcome that? And then we'll take a look at how does spinal flow support the body in overcoming headache. And this is regardless of the cause. So it doesn't matter if the headaches are due to migraine, if they're due to tension, if they are due to something really crazy like street, uh, or even, well, anyway, I'll leave it there. And then answer the big question, like the reason why you're here. Is relief really possible without a pill? Let's get into it. Spinal Flow was developed by Dr. Carly Axford. She is a trained chiropractor. And while working at the Texas Back so she, actually worked at the Texas Back Institute. And while she was there, 85% of surgeries were prevented. Now, I realize that back pain and headaches are a lot different, right? Like headaches are up here, they impact everything. I know. I'm one of the people that has dealt with headaches and migraine. So I realize like how devastating they are and how impactful they are to every single aspect of life. Like for me, when I'm struggling, I can't even string together a coherent sentence. So totally get it. Totally get like if you've got some hesitation on, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about headache here. I'm painting the picture of where spinal flow originated. So once again, Dr. Carly was working at the Texas Back Institute, where that institute was preventing over 85% of surgeries by practicing either traditional chiropractic or integrative therapies. And chiropractic, there is a sector of chiropractic science that sees the spine as the most important organ in the body. And here's why. When vertebrae get misaligned or slightly compressed, it places resistance on the nerve impulse that is transmitted through the nerve that is exiting that part of the spine. Now, hang with me here. This is your nervous system. All right, so what we're seeing here is the brain and the spinal column. And then all of these yellow lines that are exiting the spine are actually nerves. And each and every one of these nerves is supplying a different part of the body. So if we were to look at, I'm actually going to skip ahead. So if we were to look at the nerves as they exit through the vertebra, this is a great illustration of that. So you actually see that there is space between the vertebra for these nerves to exit. Now, what do nerves do? Like, what is the role of nerves in your body? Well, we are both matter and energy. We are not merely matter, right? If you've ever seen a dead body, you know this. We are not merely matter. So, with that said, we need both matter and energy coursing through our body to keep us alive. The matter we see, that's our circulatory system, that's the bloodstream, that's the blood, that's the matter side. The nerves, transmission of nerve impulses is energy. This is energy transmitting and moving through your body. And to do that, there needs to be space, because here's what happens. If these vertebrae start to be compressed so that all of a sudden we've got bone actually touching this nerve. Or we've got disc, so like a bulging disc or compression of those vertebrae, so it makes the disc kind of flatten out, and all of a sudden the cushion substance that's in each one of your disc that is between the vertebra of your spine, it starts kind of rubbing on or getting close to that nerve. And what that does is it creates resistance to the electrical impulse that is going through that nerve to supply the organs and tissues of your body. So here is a great illustration of that. If we think of nerve impulse as the flow of water through a garden hose, and then resistance as when you either like fold the hose back on itself and are able to completely stop the flow of water, or you squish the hose down, like you put a clamp on it and squish it down. And here, I'm not talking about putting your thumb over the end of the nozzle. I'm talking about actually compressing the hose itself. Then you're able to slow that stream of water down to a trickle or even stop it. This is what we're dealing with when we're talking about nerve impulses. It's the same kind of idea. It's just with energy instead of water. All right, there's one more illustration that might help. This is a cutaway. So whereas this is an illustration of the actual vertebra within the spine, this is a cutaway. So you can see the bone and then the nerve. And here you're better able to see how these nerves move or exit through this space in between the vertebra. So that's why I included it here. All right, with spinal flow, Dr. Carly has basically aligned each region of the spine kind of with the chakral system. It's very loosely connected with the chakral system, but here you'll notice the colors, like if you're somebody that's into energy healing or yoga or chakras for any reason, you might be like, oh yeah, I recognize those colors or recognize that. So it's very loosely connected. She is very science-minded. So she tends to avoid the use of energy terms like chakras. I just wanted to call that out to your attention. Now, if we start at, actually, we're not going to go through this because you're here for headaches. So let's go straight to the region that those, and it's here. It's in the upper part of the spine. And you're like, yeah, I could have told you that. It's it's actually in the C1 and C2 vertebrae here in what she calls the pause gateway. So with this, I know there are times for me where I have felt like energy was completely trapped in my head. And it's almost like I just want this be able to release to the rest of my body because then I wouldn't have a headache. And if you have ever had that sensation, that is like a classic sign of a block in this pause gateway. And if you're like, well, what's a block? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what blocks are. But just so you know, this is the region of the spine. This is actually the C1 and C2 vertebra where we would expect in spinal flow. So when we do our initial assessment, we would actually expect to feel a blockage in your system and be able to see that in postural assessments and in a small series of activities that we have you do, like, touch your chin to your chest and a few other things like that. And each one of those where we can assess the entire spine. All right. Why do these areas of restriction show up? Well, once again, this is true of sectors of chiropractic science as well as it is for spinal flow. The spine is viewed as the back of the mind. And this means that whenever the body experiences something it is unable to process real time. So whether this is a physical stressor, whether this is an emotional stressor. So when you, like we've all been there, right? Like there is a situation that happens that is of such emotional significance that you can't process it. And like you feel yourself if you're like me, you feel yourself kind of shutting down or compartmentalizing. That is the body beginning to store that in the back of the mind, aka the spine. And it's like, it's a protective mechanism. It's, let's put it there so she can deal with it later when she has the bandwidth. And then also chemical stressors. And chemical stressors, these present in a lot of different ways. This may be the food that you eat. Like here, it may even be when you're eating and you're stressed. So when we are in a stress state, instead of rest and digest, we don't do a good job of assimilating the food that we eat, of properly breaking down the food that we eat. And so it tends to turn into toxins rather than necessarily nourishment for the body. And so the body's like, okay, let's shuttle that to the back of the mind. Once again, the spine, store it there for later processing when we've got the bandwidth to do it. Another key time on this is like when you're sick. So when you get a cold or a flu, like any kind of bacterial infection or even viral infection, really doesn't matter. And those bacteria and viruses are making a bunch of crap in your body that your body's like, ugh, I can't deal with this. This is a bunch of bacterial toxins and viral toxins. And so if it can't process those real time, once again, those get stored in the back of the mind. And a lot of times this is like why we get kind of stiff and achy when we're getting sick. And then even for anybody that's been on, for anybody listening, and let's say maybe you've had Lyme disease or something else where you've had really extensive antibiotic treatment and you've experienced what's known as a Herxheimer reaction. And there's lots of debate over whether or not Herxheimer's really exist. But the theory behind that is that as these bacteria are being broken down, so the cell walls of those bacteria are being broken down within the body, it once again is introducing a lot of toxins to the system and gets stored along the spine. So this is the three things that are stored along the spine. And whether or not it's stored directly in the spine or stored in the musculature. So if we think about our backs, like we have a lot of muscles connecting to the back. That's kind of like our exoskeleton, if we were to think of an animal or creature that actually has exoskeletons. There's a lot of muscle connections there. So it could also be stored in these muscles along the spine, once again, for the body to process later. Still, regardless, the key takeaway here is that these actually become, whether they are physical, emotional, or chemical stressors, they actually become physical blockages. So they impact how their physical matter that is impacting how big of a space the nerves have to flow through and to move through and to sit through. And once again, whenever you have too much buildup and you've got too much compression on these nerves, it's creating electrical resistance that is impeding the transfer of signal to tissues and organs. And if that signal is as vital to life as blood flow, once that signal is impacted and the signal starts to back up, that tissue, that organ starts to atrophy, and we've started the disease process. And yes, disease process. So I ascribe to many of the health systems throughout the world that see disease as a process where you don't wake up one morning with Hashimoto's. That is a gradual, that you were developing Hashimoto's 20 years ago. So anyways, that's where we are. We have got this consistent impedance of flow. It continues to build and build and build on itself because we have the same diet, we have the same lifestyle, make the same lifestyle choices, like are exposed to the same stressors day in and day out. And here, like stressors, it can be as simple as a weekly one-on-one with your boss. All right. Why do these areas of restriction show up? Well, once again, they continue to layer on top of each other through, like, as I just described, they continue to layer on top of each other. It's like adding insult to injury as we go through every minute of every day of our lives. And so when as spinal flow practitioners, like when we are palpating someone's spine, and this is, just gentle touch, what we're able to feel is areas of inflammation. We're able to actually feel slight misalignment or torsion of a specific vertebra in different regions of the spine. We're able to feel tension. So, like one area, it's like one side just feels so much more tense than the other. And it's almost like the body is spending so much energy trying to hold you upright in that region. And it's energy that could really better be used for healing. Now, scientifically speaking, the idea behind spinal flow, and this is true, here's where I'm going to introduce a different modality, because the principles behind both are the same, and that is network spinal analysis, also known as network chiropractic. Scientifically speaking, the idea behind both spinal flow and NSA, network spinal analysis, is that they both increase the flow of cerebrospinal fluid throughout the spine. And what this does, now CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, serves a whole bunch of different functions in the body. I mean, this is something I could easily talk for an hour about all of the different things that CSF does for you, and the ways that it supports your spine and your brain, honestly, because we have cerebrospinal fluid up in our heads too. From a spinal flow and NSA perspective, the importance of cerebrospinal fluid is to encourage removal of those toxins. So if you increase this flow of cerebrospinal fluid through these blockages, what you're effectively doing is giving enough flow to allow, it's basically like increasing circulation. You're increasing circulation of your CSF, and that allows for some of these toxins to become dislodged. The cerebrospinal fluid drains back into the lymphatic system so the body can handle it, process those toxins, and eliminate them from the body. Okay, so this is like a beautiful way to support it. And there are quite a few scientific studies on looking at the flow of cerebrospinal fluid and how that's associated with different diseases, and how improvement of CSF flow actually mitigates symptoms of different diseases, including things like autism. It's incredible. All right. Now, does spinal flow actually work? Well, once again, 85% of surgeries at the Texas Back Institute while Dr. Carly was there were prevented. Now, were all of those people receiving spinal flow? No, this is before Dr. Carly ever developed spinal flow. Here's what they were receiving. They were receiving either traditional chiropractic and usually integrative therapies. It's not really possible to research and know for sure what all those therapies were, but I would be willing to bet dollars to donuts that one of them was network spinal analysis. Why do I say that? Dr. Carly is trained in network spinal analysis. I have received network spinal analysis. That is why I decided to become a spinal flow practitioner. Network spinal changed my life. Why did I not decide to become certified in network spinal? Because I'm not a trained chiropractor. I don't qualify to become certified in network spinal. I absolutely qualified to become trained in spinal flow. So that's the path I chose. And having experienced both of these modalities, I can attest, this is just one woman. I can attest they both work the same for me in my body. So quite frankly, I don't care whether I've got an NSA practitioner closer to me or a spinal flow practitioner closer to me. I am seeing one or the other of them. So what Dr. Carly, why she felt driven to develop spinal flow is because what she realized is that as she was practicing chiropractic care on people, she wasn't fixing anything. They kept